How much do you think is luck, and at what point did picking the right companies become a skill game?
I think a lot of it is luck, if I were honest.
Yeah,
I mean, there's signals, things like founder quality, the mission in the market that they're going after, the team quality that they've assembled, and investors to some extent. But I think a lot of it also ends up just being luck. And so I'd be silly to say like I knew exactly going into these roles that these companies were going to be massively successful. So a lot of it is
yeah,
luck.
yeah. I loved your podcast with Robert on science of scaling, talking about how you were quite thorough in the Lattice evaluation. Obviously, by that point, you were starting to be a pretty sharp picker, but to have three of those is awesome.
Hello and welcome to the Revenue Leadership Podcast by Topline. I'm your host, Kyle Norton, CRO at owner.com. And every Wednesday, we dive deep into the strategies and tactics being used to drive success by the best revenue leaders in the world. So join me as I sit down with revenue operators to discuss actionable frameworks that you can implement in your business today with no fluff, no sales pitches, and no platitudes.
But first, a word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Momentum.io. Momentum is a powerful tool for turning sales and customer conversations into go-to-market data. Using GenAI, it extracts, analyzes, and automates customer intelligence across your org. The best part, it's not a new platform for your team to adopt. It integrates seamlessly with your existing stack and writes data back to Salesforce directly. Some of the most innovative companies out there, like Zscaler, Demandbase, Ramp, 1Password, and even my company, owner.com, use Momentum every single day to capture forecast and churn risk, autofill Salesforce fields, share product signals, and track sentiment. So check it out with a free trial at momentum.io.
Hello and welcome to the Revenue Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Norton, and today I'm joined by Dini Mehta, who is an executive in residence at Peak 15 Ventures, Peak 15 Partners, formerly known as Sequoia India, and had two amazing runs at Drawbridge, where she was the VP of Global Sales, and then Lattice, where she was the CRO, taking both those companies from single digits to 100 million plus outcomes. So really excited to dig in, and we're going to spend time on two topics today. One is how to go multi-product as a revenue leader, which is a massively important and complex topic. And we'll also get into how to lead high engagement teams. So thrilled for the conversation, and thanks for joining us, Dini.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to go deep on these topics. And yeah, I've had a lot of hard-earned lessons. And so hopefully sharing these lessons can save folks making the same mistakes I did.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. So let's just give folks like your 60-second background. Tell us a little bit about the career story and how you got to Peak 15.
Absolutely. So originally I'm from India, born and raised there, moved to the States for college, fell into tech because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and then definitely fell into sales. The first few years I tried to do every other job and go to market except for sales because I had this negative impression of what it meant to be in sales, and then eventually realized that there's a lot of positives and decided to make
Familiar story.
Yep. We all have, a lot of us have that story. And so got my first taste of sales at a company called Quantcast, which was in hypergrowth. I was an AE there, and for 2.5 years, we went from like 10 million to 200 million in revenue. So it was like really fast, rapid growth. And from there, I wanted to see, I loved management, fell in love with management, which is what took me to Drawbridge, where I joined as the first sales hire and was there for about 5.5 years. We went from a single product to 3 products, eventually sold the business to LinkedIn. And finally, my most recent operating run was at Lattice, which is an HR tech platform, completely different than what I'd done prior, which was mostly selling to marketers and doing large enterprise sales, versus Lattice was an HR tech platform, PLG, high velocity transactional sales. And so learned a ton. Was a great run. Also joined at about 3 million and was there past 100. And now I'm in residence at Peak 15, helping a bunch of founders on their own journey of scaling go-to-markets.
Very cool. That's awesome. So Quantcast, Lattice, and Drawbridge, all quite a magic touch. Uh, How much do you think is luck, and at what point did picking the right companies become a skill game?
I think a lot of it is luck, if I were honest.
Yeah.
I mean, there's signals, things like founder quality, the mission in the market that they're going after, the team quality that they've assembled, and investors to some extent. But I think a lot of it also ends up just being luck. And so I'd be silly to say like I knew exactly going into these roles that these companies were going to be massively successful. So a lot of it is
Yeah.
luck.
Yeah. I loved your podcast with Robert on Science of Scaling, talking about how you were quite thorough in the Lattice evaluation. Obviously, by that point, you were starting to be a pretty sharp picker, but to have three of those is awesome. So, in terms of queuing up this conversation, the topic we want to really go deep on is how to go multi-product. And so, Jack Altman, who was your founder CEO, who's on our board at Owner, and said wonderful things about you, gave a talk at SaaStr last year about some of the unexpected ways that going multi-product benefited Lattice. And it wasn't all just expansion into the base. It was about higher win rates, bigger ACVs at the top of the funnel. It was a really fascinating talk. The other side of that coin, and that was, product centric. And the other side of this coin is, how the heck do you do it and go to market? You go from selling one single product to many, and there's so many complexities that we want to unpack. So maybe just queue up before we get into the details, the Lattice journey, like where they started and where they were in terms of this multi-product journey, and then we'll dig into the how.
Absolutely. So I had some experience with multi-product from Drawbridge. And so when I joined Drawbridge, we had a single product that was majority of the revenue. And then at about 50 million, we decided to add in a new product. But this was like we decoupled our platform and said, now we'll sell parts of the data, parts of that product as modular pieces to different personas. So I thought going into Lattice, I know how to do multi-product. This is like check. Of course, we've done this. But coming into Lattice, it was a completely different experience. And I'll touch on sort of on the high level. When I joined, we were about 3 million in revenue at Lattice, 35 people in the team. And we were just when I joined 2 months in, we were getting ready to launch our second product. So our first product was the performance suite, which was like performance reviews, one-on-ones, feedback. And our next product was this engagement surveys. And it was a big bet for the business because we were a fairly small team. On the end side, a lot of our capacity was going into building this product for the last, I think, 8 months, 12 months. And so high risk move. We had advisors telling us that this is too early to be going multi-product.
Yeah.
You've got a good thing going, like continue sort of going down that path. But the founders had good conviction. And so they'd taken this bet. And my job was to come in and figure out how do we go sell this thing? And we did that. And from there, it sort of became our playbook where every year we had a new product. And in my tenure there, over 4.5 years, we went from a single product to like 4 different products.
Wow.
And so, yeah, a lot of learnings of like how the complexity also incrementally increases as the scale of the business and the new products get added on. But yeah, definitely a fun thing to navigate.
For sure. And now they're a full-blown HRS, which is a whole other can of worms,
Right.
another huge, bet the company type of thing, which is fun to see.
Yep. That was the
So,
dream.
let's unpack the first time going multi-product and launching the engagement product. So you're 2 months in. How did you try to get with a small team? I would imagine at that point. How did you think about preparation for going multi-product? How'd you think about the go-to-market messaging? What were the key components that you needed to put in place to be able to sell that second product?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, it was understanding what the product is. And so what we were launching was engagement surveys. Secondly, understanding how does this second product connect to the current product. Third was like, is it the same persona? What I was used to in my prior job at Drawbridge was selling to different personas, which is a different version of multi-product, where you're selling into the same account and it's primarily expansion based, but selling to a completely different persona. Versus here, we were selling a new product to the same persona. And so first was understanding what the product is. Then how does it fit into our current product story? Is there a connection, or is it just an added SKU that we're adding onto the platform? Third, how do we tell that story? Because now we are no longer a performance management company. We're now transitioning from performance management to what is the thing we're transitioning to. So working with marketing, working with the exec team, which was fairly small at that point, and figuring out what is our messaging. And then we were at that point, gosh, how big were we? We were like 5 AEs, fairly small, like early. This was 5 AEs, couple BDRs. Our marketing team was like 3 people, including our head of marketing. So it was very, very lean team. And we were like, I think a week away from launch, 1 week away from like launching this product. And we're like, well, we need to like figure out how we're going to train the team on it. We've got to do something. And so this is the chaos of startups where I literally cleared my calendar for 2 days, and the CEO and we just locked ourselves up in a conference room and said, we're going to do certifications for every person that's client facing. And so we came up with materials for the team saying, you're going to study this. We're going to do a demo. We're going to tell you what the positioning is. And then we locked ourselves up in this room, came up with a rubric, and basically did all day for 2 days certifications across AEs, BDRs, CSMs.
Wow.
Early days. Fun times.
Very cool. And in subsequent product launches, did you still run a similar certification process? Obviously more robust, but was that always a part of it?
Yeah, thankfully a lot more robust and run by enablement, not with just us sitting in a room, because that wasn't the best use of time. But at that point, it was the earlier days, and it set the tone. We also sort of made sure people knew, like not everyone passed on the first go. So it wasn't just like a check the box type of certification. We really wanted people to feel the importance of what it meant to represent a second product, and make sure that we're telling the right story. Because a lot of times when you launch a second product, it's easy to be like, yeah, I got it. I got the main features. I'm going to get out there. And then what happens is you sort of still keep selling the first product that you launched with, and you undersell your new product. And so the goal was to like really stress the importance that the reason we're sitting in this conference room and the reason we're doing certifications and partly keeping a high bar on who gets certified is to make sure people knew that this is an important part of our new messaging, our new sales plays. And so, we definitely got more robust, but it was like a good signaling to the team of how important it is that we're doing this right now.
And when you launched engagement surveys, was the focus to go upsell a bunch of existing customers? Was it more about enabling people to win new business? What was the priority?
We thought the focus was going to be primarily selling to new customers. So it was mostly about growth. And we thought this is going to attract a mid-market customer. At that point, we were primarily an SMB business in terms of the segment that we played in. And we thought this is gonna be more interesting to mid-market customers. That was our assumption when launching the product. And we thought, yeah, maybe some of the existing customers might be interested, but this is going to really allow us to sell to a different customer base. But that wasn't the case. Our existing customers were interested in consolidating or at least looking at the product. We also had a lot of interest from SMB in this product, for this product. So there was a certain level of like the assumptions we had, and that happened with most of our product launches. The assumptions we had around who's going to be interested versus post-launch, what we'd learn was there was always new learnings in that, which is like, oh, interesting. We didn't think this was based on the, research we'd done and the product work we'd done.
Hmm.
We thought this was going to hit this part of the market, but actually, so we learned to stay open.
Interesting. Um, and when you got more sophisticated, how much validation were you doing? Like you have this surprise. So in future launches, did you go out and try to like validate that stuff ahead of time? Or did you say, if it's new or existing, we're happy either way? Like how much rigor did you put around that?
We were very good about talking to our existing customers around product strategy, what we're thinking about, and making sure we were building products that we think would resonate with
Hmm.
with the customers. So we definitely did our validation, but there's still sort of, you're not doing every segment and every cut of the market when you're validating. And so
Hmm.
there's still consistently like parts of it. And it was mostly healthy surprises, which is like we didn't realize that this was the impact we're going to see in this part of the market, which is interesting.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was a big, when we launched it, it was primarily to like, can we open up a new segment of the market? In reality, it helped us. It increased our win rates. It increased our ACVs, even to the existing base that we were selling to, which was a happy surprise.
Hmm. And so what were the other big benefits? So increased win rates, increased ACV, you got expansion revenue. What other big outcomes did you find with launching subsequent products?
Yeah, I think the win rate and the ACVs were the highest pieces. That also led to healthy attainment rates for the sales team. The other part was like, we're in a fairly noisy space. Lots of companies
Mhm.
were doing the same thing. Like you could get a performance management suite for free if you have ADP. So like in some ways we were competing with free. There's a ton of more mature um, competitors in space that had
Mhm.
5 years of heads up on us in terms of product build outs. And there's a ton that were like copying us and were cutting their price in half. So it was a fairly
Right.
noisy space. So the chance to have a second product and saying we were the first in market to consolidate performance management and engagement surveys was powerful, because now we could say this is the first time you can connect and see how are your top performers feeling, because those two things
Mhm.
should be overlapped, and like you don't have that insight today, and a lot of times you're surprised when a top performer leaves. What if you could do something about that proactively? And now, because we are connecting those data sets, we can help you proactively manage that if there's like hotspots that aren't doing well.
Right.
And so it was, I think that positioning and that story really helped. um, the sort of increased win rates. It translated into increased win rates, higher ACVs. It also opened
Lower
up new
churn, I would
opportunities,
imagine.
lower
I would
churn,
imagine. Yeah, it's stickiness.
stickiness, and then consolidation. Folks wanted, they didn't want multiple vendors. And so
Mhm.
it opened up new types of opportunities for us, people that were coming in and would say, well, I only want engagement, but a completely different ICP. And so, understanding if that would be a good fit for us, but it did open up a lot of our top of the funnel conversations we were having.
Mhm.
And, eventually it became the thing that people knew in market, that Lattice launches a new product every year.
Hmm.
So product velocity and product breadth became a core part of our strategy, where it was like competitors knew, like every year we're going to launch a new product.
Very cool. The more top of funnel one's an interesting one because there's just an entire new category you can go rank for and be featured against, and it's like a totally new way to come in if somebody doesn't need the first product at that point.
And then
Hmm.
it's so much of it is like the story you tell, even if someone comes in with employee engagement, because we kept a single sales team selling all products, which was another debate we
Okay,
spent
I
time
wanted to
thinking
get here.
about. Yes, because that was, it was like every time we launched a product, we thought about, well, should this product be like a specialized team that just focuses on this product? And we consistently made the decision of like, no, we're going to train our current teams and have them sell all products. They both those approaches have their trade-offs.
Yeah.
But ultimately we decided to like stick with our current team learning the product, just given the sort of buyer experience in that. And also, like, you can pivot if somebody comes in and asking for product 2, but you know that you could really help them see the value in product A and then bundle and give you, sort of make commercial discounts happen to get them to buy multiple products. That was a core part of the sales strategy, which was easier to deploy when you have a single AE selling all products versus multiple AEs selling different products.
Right. So how did you make that decision? So we talked a little bit about the outcomes, like the buyer experience, the ability to have more things in your bag to sell in that moment, bundling. Like, what's the other side of it? In what situations would you have a specialist rep, or like what are the pros and cons of each?
I think in a Drawbridge, we had specialist reps that even within the same account, these were large enterprises, but within the same account, we'd have rep A sell product 1, and rep B sell product 2. And it made sense because they were different personas, and there
Okay.
wasn't a ton of, so I think persona, if you're selling to the same persona, that's one reason to think through, like, does it make sense to have multiple reps sell to the same persona under the same
Yeah.
umbrella, which was the chief people officer. 2 is the velocity at which you're shipping new products to. If
Mm-hmm.
you're shipping them twice a year, I would think, and even this was like towards the end, it definitely became more challenging to train the team on, we've got 4 products, now you've got a 5th one. So you've got to
Yeah.
remember as a rep, lots of breadth, but also depth in each of those products. And so it becomes a training and enablement challenge. So that was the flip side of it. Third, it's like, who's accountable? Because yes,
Mm-hmm.
reps are going to maximize ACVs and try to maximize win rates, but ultimately, if your product through 2 and 3, like, ultimately, who's owning the quota for those specific products? Like, those are the trade-offs we thought about, and ultimately, my answer was, I'll be accountable to make sure we have the right comp plan, the right incentives, the right
Right.
training structure to make sure our current team sells through products in new business and then expands it post sale.
Okay. I want to come back to incentives. So in terms of the structure, buyer experience, the personas, bundling, like if you don't bundle a lot, then maybe this single threaded rep isn't necessary. And so the reason to have multiple reps would be like maybe the technical breadth. What else would get you to have multiple reps selling the same product as opposed to one?
Technical depth would be one. Just the ability to go really deep on a specific product and
Yeah,
be the specialists on that product. 2, the accountability per product, revenue per product would be
right.
another piece, because now you've got quota assigned to a specific product versus sort of general quota assigned against all products. Um, so it's accountability. And third, it's like the rollouts become so much simpler, because now you've got
Right.
basically a GM structure where the product manager directly talks to the PMM that's associated with that product, talks to the sales team, versus in this org, even though you've got specific product managers, they've got to go sell to all of customer facing employees, which is a challenge. So the complexity internally of
Yeah.
launching new products, there's a real overhead to that on the flip side.
Yeah. So when I joined Shopify, it was to like greatly expand the sales led motion for our point of sale product. Point of sale had been like a down market product led thing, and they rebuilt the whole suite. It was ready for prime time. They wanted to take it up market and needed a sales led motion. And it was interesting being uh, a new team over on the side that had no connection to the existing sales team. Like, we didn't even roll into the same CRO. The two
Wow.
org charts didn't overlap until basically the CEO, I don't think, because it was owned by a VP of product who owned that category, that had its own marketing team, own sales team. And the decision there was, look, like, this other team's never going to pay attention to point of sale. Their number for next year is like $1 billion in net new revenue, and my target was like 130. Like, they're just not. It's not worth paying attention. And so to give it its own life and its own space to be successful. We needed a totally separate thing. And then we got it to a level where arguably we were too successful for our own good, and they wanted to collapse everything together and
Yep.
bring it under one roof. But it was really challenging to be a separate thing and then try to bring it all together. That product basically didn't stall out, but didn't grow anywhere as fast as it should have in the year we tried to bring it together, because now it was a small thing that wasn't going to drive the main number. And now it's come back to prominence and they've restaffed it. But it was interesting for me to see the other side of things. There were 3 different sales teams that never overlapped in the org chart. Yeah, financial products, point of sale, and then our core plus product. And
Yeah.
now everything's all together, and it's I think for many organizations that's a more effective approach if the rep can handle it.
Yeah. I think
I,
that's the big question mark. Like,
I
can
almost
the rep
think
handle it?
Yeah, I almost think as hearing you talk it through, the default answer should be give it to the existing reps unless it is so complex that they can't do it. It's so different and it's going to take them away from their existing things so much that you need a specialist, but the default should be try to make it work with one rep, even from a buyer's perspective. That would make sense to me.
Yeah, or it's like there's clear reason to do it if it's a different persona. I think HubSpot had done
Right.
that,
Yeah.
where they've done it really successfully, where they've had this motion going, and then they sort of seeded a new one with PLG. Actually, they started
Yeah.
sales led, then added PLG, and then consolidated it all. And I think it can be done, but there is just so much complexity, and there's complexity on both approaches. I always, when I thought about all the things I faced at Drawbridge when I had 2 reps in the same account,
Right.
with the 2 different products, it was like the sort of attribution challenges and the confusion on the buyer side, even with 2 personas, is yeah. So I agree with you. The default, especially if you're a mid-market SMB focused business selling to the same
Yeah.
persona, is default to the same rep and through enablement. And eventually we added in a layer of SEs that played specialists,
Right.
product
Right. Right.
specialists, so we could pull them in for like and I wish we did that earlier. Like in hindsight,
Mm.
we waited too long to like add that layer in instead of continuing to like force reps to learn everything. And we could have just said, here's a SME, a specialist that'll help you with anything related to compensation, or anything related to OKRs. So maybe that is one learning in hindsight.
That's a really interesting takeaway. Yeah, I think that's one that I'm going to put in the old memory bank.
Yeah.
So let's go to incentives. How did you think about incentivizing? It's this new product. I'm not really comfortable. It's harder to sell. The market doesn't get it. How do you actually get a rep to be excited to go sell this new thing when all of our status quo bias would push us away from embracing that new thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think using spiffs was really big for us in the beginning, and then bragging rights. Like
Mm,
we had a huge culture of celebration on deals,
mm,
and watching a rep being able to turn a 7K deal into a 13K deal because they added on a second product, and seeing
yeah,
what that did to their quota and how they were able to navigate it, and the fact that they get bragging rights of, so we had fun contests of like who sold the first 10 deals, because so much of it is just creating momentum in the beginning, because once you get that initial momentum, people pick up and
right.
sort of drive it. But changing the status quo, and letting inertia win is the challenge. And so spiffs were huge, contests were huge. A lot of this was like, we tried not to touch the comp plans, because when you touch comp plans, it's like there's always trade-offs to it. So we tried to sort of focus more on like what are like short-term spiffs, and what are the cultural things we can do to really celebrate. So like even at
Yeah.
company all hands, we talk about, oh, these folks closed the first 5 deals for this new product. And so I think folks really tried to live up to that. And then it became part of the fabric of the culture of like, we launch a new product and I want to be the first 5 on the leaderboard that sells it.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I'm reading The Power of Moments right now by the Heath brothers, and one of the things that they talk about is like the importance of the recognition feedback loop. So they talk about this. research by Carolyn Wiley. And so she's University of Roosevelt University. And so they did a study of like employee engagement over 50 years. And the thing that came up every single time in every survey they did across 50 years was as the only thing that stayed a top two input in every single one was continuous ongoing recognition, and not like a recognition program. The point they're making is it's not a program.
No.
It's just like every week, is there a drip feed of recognition going to your employees on like a one-to-one basis? And all the engagement research, like the Gallup Q12 stuff that I really like. And so I think that's a really interesting piece of it. Like, it doesn't need to be just about the money. It could be that recognition and the reinforcement.
Yeah, and we saw that even with like other things, like when we launched Outbound and like getting people to actually go and do outbound. It's a challenge when you've got good inbound demand and you're in a place where you can find your way to quota just through inbound, like getting folks to say, no, now let's spend time on this thing that's painful, but it is important long term for you. And like I think using recognition and creating that culture of bragging rights like really went a long way, where people wanted to step up and help figure it out. So I couldn't agree more with that.
And like making it a thing, making it a moment. Like this is the thing that is sort of everywhere in our ecosystem in the company. The shout outs, the leaderboard, the spiffs, that all that added momentum. That's cool.
Yeah, and I think it's like important to only do one or two things. Like what you can't do is like have 10 things that are all we're going to get recognized and they're all important. And so like you've got to pick one thing for this quarter. It's like we're going to launch this product and do an amazing job at it, or we're going to launch Outbound. So I think I agree with like making it a thing across the board.
But first, a word from our sponsors.
Are you coming to GTM 2024 in Austin, Texas? It's going to happen October 14th to 16th. I'm Kim Scott, and I wrote Radical Candor and Radical Respect. At GTM 2024, I'm going to be diving into how you can solicit feedback. It'll give you the opportunity to read minds. How you can give both praise and criticism, and how you can gauge how what you are saying is landing and make corrections so that you can have better conversations. Whether you're looking to improve your relationships at work or improve your results at work, this session will equip you with the strategies to excel in 2025. So don't wait. Get your ticket before they sell out. You can get it at joinpavilion.com/GTM 2024. See you in Austin.
That's great. And so just going back to incentives, did you change the structure of the comp plan outside of spiffs, or did you were still just going to pay on ACV and this was a way to get more ACV, or did you have your comp plan broken down by product and like certain products got higher percentage? Or just walk me through what the comp plan looked like.
No, we thought about it almost every 6 months. We'd be like, should we change our comp plan? Should we add in the product-based quotas or give people guidance? And we decided against it because it could lead to odd behaviors. I did that for outbound, which was a mistake, where we actually said we'll pay you more on outbound deals than inbound deals. And it's to just incentivize action on outbound. And it actually drove the wrong kind of behavior, because people were like, well, I don't want to share this lead with marketing when they're running a program because I want to get credit, or I'll spend more time on a $5,000 outbound deal than a $10,000 inbound deal. So it was like weird incentives. And so we decided to, instead of changing the comp plan, educating the team on the upside if you sold these additional products, what that does to your ACVs, what that does to your quota attainment. Like you have to sell less deals to get to same or higher levels of performance on a quarterly basis. So we put in resources around your quota calculators. We'd sort of talk about it in all hands, saying, here's Kevin. Kevin's crushed selling new products. He sold less deals, but has produced more revenue. Here's what it meant. So much of it was less the comp plan changes and more, again, part of like just beating the drum on the advantages that you have. The company has a ton of advantage of selling multiple products, but you can give yourself a raise by adding this to your playbook.
Yeah, that comp visibility is so important. Like QuotaPath does a good job with this. Their whole shtick is like, we're not going to just calculate quotas for finance, but we're going to like show the rep and help you incentivize people. I think that gets, we don't utilize that enough as revenue leaders, like helping people see the math and visualize, like, hey, this is like a $12,000 paycheck if you can get X and Y by selling these new things. So the whole time you had just an ACV based comp plan.
Yep.
Nice and simple
Nice and
accelerators.
simple. Yep. We had accelerators and that's it.
You were listening to Roberge. Simplicity is a part of the comp philosophy from Sales Acceleration Formula.
100%.
That's awesome. So I wanted to go into enablement. So let's maybe fast forward beyond you and Jack in a boardroom certifying. What did a great enablement and rollout look like? How far before you launched did you start doing stuff? Just walk me through like what best in class enablement looked like.
Yeah. I'm a huge believer of enablement. I think a lot of times,
Me too.
revenue leaders underutilize enablement and think it's just training, but enablement can be so much more. Like it always reported directly into me, partly because I wanted to make sure people, it's strategic if you leverage it such, can be the glue that really connects all the pieces of the org. Because as you start to scale, the thing that's hardest is like, how do you make sure especially in a remote hybrid world where we're not all in an office all the time, the risk of people coming up with their own versions of what this product's meant to do is so high. Like just their own versions of reality. Forget product launches, but for anything. And enablement can play the role of really making sure product marketing, product sales, customer success are all sort of saying the right things. So product marketing is like pre-product when you're building the product, plays that role of the quarterback across product, marketing, content, all the pieces. And then once it's closer to launch, that's where enablement takes over. And enablement's responsible of working with product marketing and saying, okay, now how do I translate this, this new feature, this new product, and make it relevant and translate it for the different audiences and stakeholders. So a BDR doesn't need to know all the details about every product, but they need to be able to speak to the value and what it means. A CSM might need to go in much more detail and explain sort of how an existing customer might see value and the reporting advantages or whatever the feature advantages are. Sales has to tell the story. So I think there's like different ways to construct enablement that is personalized to the different stakeholders in the business, which I think a lot of times people think of enablement as like, well, they take stuff for product marketing, create a deck and train the team. Which, is the base level. It's like the most at the foundational level, that's what it is. But I think at its best, it can truly be the glue that connects all the pieces together.
For sure. I've been very lucky to work with awesome enablement people, and I'm super picky about it, but it's, absolutely such a strategic asset for me. So shout out to Mel and Rob and Ray. Who wrote the narrative? So when you took things to market, who wrote what the reps said?
It's a good question because it was a joint effort. Because when we had it where it was just marketing doing it, or just enablement doing it, it had its blind spots. So what we learned is like for every product launch, we'd pick a small team that would workshop the positioning. So it'd start with, product marketing would lead that exercise. So they come to the table saying, here's what we're thinking, here's the positioning, here's the story, here's the market. And then sales would come back with, well, I don't know if that resonates. That doesn't feel like how I talk. So how do I now turn this positioning document into something that's usable at the different levels? And so we'd have one or two AEs from different segments. We'd have enablement and we'd have marketing. For smaller features, enablement would play that role. But for large product launches, we'd create that group like a couple months before launch. And so we're workshopping it.
Okay.
Yeah. So this was when we were fairly mature and had enough resources when we weren't planning 2 weeks before launch.
And so when would you have reps in the, like, would you have reps pitching the product before it's officially announced? Would you like sell it ahead to get feedback? Or how did you stage, like, okay, we think that our customers are going to want this product and we've got this messaging and we're building it, but like, when did you go validate with real world conversations and ask people for money? Like, how
Yeah,
did you think about getting, because, it's asking people if they want it and asking people for money are two very different things.
totally.
When did you start to do those things?
Yeah, I mean, we'd launch it to our existing customer base a month in advance typically, and so that was our
Okay.
like first, like, let's get them to use it, let's get some feedback. So our CSM teams in partnership with the product lead would have those conversations. We'd get insight from that, and then the sales team would start practicing um, pitching the product a couple weeks before the launch at a minimum. And so
Mhm.
we'd have it launched internally on our demo products, but we weren't allowed to show it to customers till we publicly launched it. And so
Yeah.
for 2 weeks, we had certifications going on. People were pitching it. We wanted to make sure that we were ready. So as soon as we launched, that's basically where everybody would start having the conversation. And the race starts to who's going to sell the
Okay.
first 10 deals.
So the first time you pitched it was after the public launch.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And had you guys considered like getting people to pitch it before the public launch in order to get the kinks out? Or what was the reason to stage it that way?
Yeah, I mean, we did it with existing customers. So
Right.
CSMs
Okay.
would pitch it early on. So we like would, through those cycles, we'd get a sense for like what are the bugs, what are the things we need to like clearly misses that we need to fix. But on the new biz side, when we're talking to prospects, typically the whole team was got the go at the same
One
time.
big bang.
Yep,
Okay.
ready to go.
Very cool. And so no selling ahead, like that you would announce it and then that product was available and live, like
Yeah,
ready to sell and implement that day.
yeah,
Okay.
no selling ahead. Which was
Interesting. And
hard
what,
because reps,
yeah.
were like ready. They're like, well, I have it in my demo. I can already start selling it, which was always the hardest part. Because on the flip side, then the product's like, well, we don't want to get all these features into the demo if we're going to already start selling it because we haven't launched it. So that was a hard thing the first few times. But then we got to a place where we were good about just holding, saying, hey, this launches Tuesday. That's when we talk about it to give it the
Okay.
surprise element in market.
Probably the right customer centric way to do it. Cause, many companies, you've got a product launch coming in on Jan 1 and it's September 26th and
Yep.
we're pitching, oh, we got this thing, it's great. And then you're just sort of sandbagging the
Yep.
implementation until it's actually ready, which
Yeah, we were
has
very
its risks.
conservative with that. And there were debates on that, like should we be more aggressive? It's like launch it 6 months before it's ready and start pitching it ahead, and we just never did that. We're like we'd rather just wait.
And that's a cultural thing that was, basically, you were highly customer centric. Is that the reasoning?
That was just, yeah, we didn't want to like lose customers' trust by
Yeah.
pre-selling, and now they're getting a bad experience and we're figuring it out. So we wanted to be buttoned up when we showed up and sold a new product. And so they had high confidence in that Lattice, when they pitch a new product, they're ready.
Yeah. And HR tech is such a small ecosystem. That buying community is pretty I sold
Yep.
into HR tech for like 3 years and, it's a unique one and they've got,
Yes.
very tight groups. So that makes a ton of sense to me.
Yep.
Um, I want to talk a little bit about, so when you were talking about the comp plan and incentives and being able to basically guide people to this new outcome without having to do, like crazy comp plan magic, it really sounds to me like you need a team of people that are willing to do things for the company. And, that's more missionary versus mercenary, as oftentimes people say. So I would imagine that the culture you were able to build enabled you to launch a product and just be like, please go sell this, and have them say, okay, let's go sell this, versus, I've seen many companies where you need to, like, it's triple commission for the new thing, and you're, putting like specific KPIs, and you don't get any commission, and you sell this certain amount of the product. I'm guessing that this was possible because of the, like, engagement and mindset of your team. Am I right there?
100%. Yeah, I think
Okay.
there were people deeply engaged and cared about the mission of the company. Not just one of our values was shipmate self. And it was one of my favorite
Yeah.
values. And so I think people like very deeply internalized that, which was, I've got to put the company first, my team second, and myself last. And it's the hardest to implement and live up to in sales, given that it is competitive, it's high stakes, it's high pressure. But I was very proud of the team that like really lived up to those values and sort of put the company first in scenarios where it was hard to.
Cool. So let's transition to how do you get to that point? How do you build an engaged enough team where they are legitimately shipmate self? And maybe just start with, like, your business case for engagement, because I think people hear this and they think it's like squishy and soft, and maybe not in some of the sales DNA that exists in our world. And so how would you make, what argument would you make for the business imperative of, driving to engagement?
Yeah, no, it's I feel very strongly about it, and I've always felt strongly about it. But now that I've seen the results that it can drive, um, it's like I have very high conviction that building a high performing team that delivers consistently starts with a people first approach and a highly engaged team. Like there's just no two ways about it. Like you can get performance from people through transactional approaches, through fear, through scarcity, which is what a lot of sales orgs are built on. They're
Mm-hmm.
built on a foundation of fear and scarcity. When I first started in sales, I was surprised that like we're all part of the same company, but somehow you're like pitted against this different region and you're not supposed to share best practices. And
Yeah.
it's just odd. Or like, managers would tell you things in a one-on-one or team meeting and we'd all agree that, yep, we'll do that. And then you leave and like people are like, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, there's
And
no way.
and it's just my mind was blown. Like, what kind of team doesn't just tell the manager that I'm not going to do it, and here's why not? And so, yeah, one of the reasons I went to Lattice after Drawbridge was to try to build a different type of revenue org. Because a lot of people asked me, like, why would you, you sort of just went off of a big run. Why would you go to a $3 million Series A business? Like,
Yeah.
that's, it was sort of a head scratching move for a lot of people that cared about me. But the reason partly was, of course, I believed in the market. I really hit it off with Jack. But part of it was also the chance to build a different type of revenue org where a younger me would have felt more like I belonged and
Right.
felt like it didn't have to go against the grain. Because I think there's this misconception that salespeople are coin operated and all they care about is money. And it's just not true. Like everyone, from engineers to even commission driven salespeople, want the same things. They want to feel like they're part of a community. They
Mm-hmm.
want to feel like they're getting growth and they're, getting the development on an annual basis. And if there's a purpose that they're going after. And I feel like those three pillars make up so much of highly engaged teams. And, I think um, there's a huge opportunity for sales teams to embrace that.
Yeah. And what are the business outcomes? Like, what does an engaged team get you that a more mercenary style team doesn't get you?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've seen, it's like it drives. We had over 100% attainment for the 4.5
Yeah.
years I was there. We
But, like,
missed.
why? Like, why? Like, what? I'm trying to get you to make the argument to the skeptics. Like,
Yep.
what's the thing that translates like engagement to outcomes in your mind?
Yeah, I think it's people care so much
Yeah.
more than when it's a transactional thing. When you get treated like a number, you sort of treat the job as a job, versus when you're bought in and you think you feel like an owner in the business, which is a big part of driving
Mm-hmm.
engagement. You feel accountable. to the business. And you're not doing it because your manager is asking you to. You're doing it because you care, because you think you have a voice, because you think you can really. This is your company, and that's what. When you care, when you invest in your people, the people invest back in the business. It's like such a simple concept, and so many companies get it wrong, where it's just you give trust and you get trust. You give
Yeah.
care and you get care back. And so I think a lot of it is hiring people. And, we were at the height of the talent war. We had less than 1% voluntary attrition over 4.5 years, which,
Wow.
which, which was
That's a
like,
good business case.
which was a testament to like, we have these amazing high performers that could go get any job, make a lot more money somewhere else. And they were getting poached all the time, but they chose to stay at Lattice, partly because they felt like they were part of this team, partly because they were getting the growth through the career tracks, and partly because they were like bought into the mission of the business.
Yeah. And I've heard Jack talk about this a bunch where he talks about the value of years 3, 4, and 5 of an employee. If the average tenure of a tech employee is 2 years and you can have them stay 4, like how impactful are they in year 3 and 4? And if you knew that, what would you put into it to get them to stay for that extra period? Like product management, engineering, like there's,
Yeah.
when you have this and sales, obviously the same thing. Like when you have a knowledge of the market and a craft depth, like it really does make an impact. The book I always steer people to is Drive by Daniel Pink here.
Yes.
And so it's almost the same framework. You're talking about community growth and purpose. His framework is autonomy, mastery, purpose. I think that I would argue that community, instead of AMP, it could be CAMP, community, autonomy, mastery, purpose. And he makes the case for intrinsic motivation. And that is from, feeling connected to a mission and like you're a part of something bigger than yourself and people care about you. The attrition thing is like such a big one. So
I think so many people forget, like, as you start to get into hyper growth, you put in all your effort into hiring. You've got a recruiting team, you're thinking about headcount, all your effort is there. But the thing that people don't realize is like, if you've got a leaky bucket, just like in a business, like if you've got that churn and you're like crushing your new business, but churn's just sort of, it's a leaky bucket. And the foundation that a tenured person who's been in the business for 3 years provides in hyper growth environments, it's one of the best things you can do. It's like this undervalued piece that people don't put enough resources and attention into retention of their top.
Yeah.
It's like an accepted reality. Like 18 months is good enough. 24 months, people leave, time's over. But yeah.
For sure. It's I'm right there on this bandwagon. I am always sharing that. The thing I like is the Gallup Q12 research, which is sort of the top 12 inputs to engagement. And when you study it, like comp isn't even really on there. Like nothing necessarily office centric is on there. Like once you understand the components, it makes a lot more sense. They make a compelling argument. So the key pillars for you: community growth, purpose. How did you make that come to life? Because I think a lot of people struggle. This is a much more vulnerable way to operate. Like you have to sort of be exposed and give before you get in a way that is uncomfortable. But what are the key ways that you like made those 3 things come to life? Like what can you tell people that they can implement in their business today to like actually drive a sense of community and give people growth and purpose?
Yeah. I mean, I think early on building community is easy because you're like in a small team. It's, you can all fit in a conference room to feel connected, and there's easier ways to drive that. But I'd say, like, how do you do this at scale? Like, it starts with hiring. You've got to hire people that are, of course, excellent at what they do, but are also very passionate about what you represent. Like we've passed on people that are amazing at the role that we're trying to hire them, but didn't seem as excited about the mission that we represent. And so really sort of thinking about our values, thinking about our mission as part of the recruiting process. And it's hard to do in practice, but we had a values interview at every role in the business, that sort of forced us to look at sort of, is this person going to be here through the hard times? Because it's easy to be excited to be at a company during hypergrowth, but what happens when you hit a rough patch, which all companies do, and you want people that aren't going to be transactional and say, I'm out, I'm going to go find the next best thing instead of
Because we'll
sticking
all
it
hit
out.
that rough patch.
Yep, because we all do. There's like no way you avoid it, right? Even in the best of environments. So I think finding people that are excited about the mission um, are folks that'll like stick through the storm. And so really looking for that in the
Right.
hiring. To onboarding, I think that is an undervalued place where people don't onboard folks onto the culture. Like most people think of onboarding as like, okay, here's my product, here's my market, here's how to do the job. But really spending time on like, what does it mean to be part of this culture? Because if you don't do that, people just bring what they've experienced in their past job.
Right.
And so much of it was, we'd give people specific exercises. So like clear eyes was another one of our values in the company. And I would do an onboarding session with the team around the revenue orgs, ethos, what we care about. And one of the exercises was, I want you to go give feedback to someone in management about something that you've noticed that you think needs to be changed. Because you want to, as a new person, you're like, I don't know anything. I'm just going to sit here and learn. But the reality is, you've got the gift of fresh eyes, which all of us don't, because we've been here for a while and we're in the trenches, we're drinking our Kool-Aid, and we need you to come and tell us. And, we got some really obvious things that people would point out saying, why is there segmentation like that? And why don't we have this? And we're like, I don't know. It shouldn't be. You're right.
Very
But
cool.
giving people the sort of confidence to say, you're part of this team, you're hired for a reason, we want you to have a voice, and here's an exercise for this specific value for you to go do that. It was uncomfortable for people, but then once they did it, they saw how openly people were like, wow, that's a great call. We'll do it. Then it became part of the culture.
And so what is the clear eyes value? That's a value about giving feedback?
It's like basically honesty. Like how do you treat your customers, your partners, your employees, your coworkers with honesty? So like if you think of something, you've got to give that lead with honesty instead of so that was the value about. And so we really sort of honed that in.
Very cool. Any other like actionable things you did in onboarding to onboard people into the culture, which is a saying that I love and I'm going to borrow now?
Yeah. I mean, we did like get people to feel the culture, not just talk about it. And so our all hands, like you would feel the fact that we were excited to be here. We really believed in the business in every touch point, whether it's a sales meeting, whether it's a all hands, and they would feel that at the end of the first week. We had a channel in the sales channel, in the Slack channel. This was in the remote world. We would used to do it in person before, but basically we would share like these people just finished their first week, and people would like share things that they loved about meeting them in that thread. So now you're like seen as a person, like, hey, I enjoyed learning this about you in our one-on-one, or, I'm super excited for you to bring this to our team, given that that's a unique skill. Like as a new person, that's very empowering that these people see me as who I am. I'm bringing something unique here. You build their confidence. And there's like a lot of little things we did like that to really get people to come in and be their authentic self in the business.
Cool. I'm so stealing that. I absolutely love
Yes.
that. Like first week graduation, have everybody tell them something they like learning about them. That's a great one.
I love it.
I just want to go back to hiring and ask. So you have a values interview in every hiring process. What does a values interview look like?
We basically, and it's this was led by, we used to do it as part of each of the departments used to do it on their own. So we have people that'll take, we have 4 values, and you have questions against each of those values. And basically we're evaluating, like, is this person at their core embody the values we care about? Doesn't mean they have to have every value and they have to be excited about all of them, but we want to make sure that there's like good alignment on values, because that's the thing that we don't want to compromise on. And eventually we actually had folks where you had to be out of a different department to do the values interview to reduce the level of like, because if you're excited to hire someone And it's easy to be, confirmation bias of like, yeah, great values. We're going to say yes to this. So we actually added in another layer of saying, okay, if you're interviewing for a sales role, an engineer is going to come in and interview you for a values role. Because he doesn't know your functional expertise, he's just evaluating purely on to limit bias. That was another thing we did in the values.
Very cool. And would those people have to get certified on it?
On the values interviews? Yes.
Yeah, okay.
To interview. Yeah. Any interviewer that was on a panel had to get certified.
Cool. It's a lot like the Amazon bar raiser program where it has to be from somewhere else and they have, you're doing these 4 values and you're doing these 4 values.
Yep.
I like that one. And so the questions, so you had like clear eyes as a value. What type of questions would you ask, like to determine if somebody is honest? Are they behavioral, situational? Give me a flavor for that.
Yeah, typically behavioral and situational. So like give people an example of like, and we'd have that by department where in sales, it's like, okay, you're taking on a lead, or you've gotten assigned a lead. Somebody else has been working that account 2 weeks before you. What do you do in that situation? Like, how do you handle that? You've already had a great conversation. It's in your pipeline, but you just realized that someone else had just touched this account. So to get a sense for like, how does this person resolve conflict? Do they go directly? It's like, oh, I'm going to go talk to my manager versus I'm going to go tell this person, or I'm going to wait till the deal gets done and then go talk about it. So there was we had situational behavioral questions peppered in that were relevant to that department, in addition to like general sort of, who you are as a person to get a sense for like how they would operate in different situations.
Awesome. And so this is community. So it starts with hiring, then onboarding. Anything ongoing with existing employees that was like a key thing for you to build community?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the community part, it was people just so much of it. We did a lot of our offsites or even our meetings would be like no agenda meetings, just to hang as people. Like every team lead would like host a Friday hang, where people would just show up and it was like no agenda. Let's just talk about what's going on. Like the things you would do in an office that are easy to do sitting around a sales floor. We would try to replicate that on a Zoom. And so it created, we had another thing that we used to do is called show and tell. So this was across the whole org, across go-to-market, where we would pick a speaker and they would come in and talk about something outside of work that they're super passionate about. And they'd do a presentation, go deep on it, and try to connect it back to like how that makes them a better Latician. And so it was very popular. You got to learn like all kinds of random things about people, like folks, were selling, someone had a whole full-on laser business. While
Laser business, okay.
Yeah, they were selling lasers and very passionate about lasers. Someone else who was, there's all kinds of like something from their past, something from their current life that they're very passionate about. And so we did, show and tells were a big part of also building community and making sure folks saw each other beyond the role they did in the company.
Awesome. Cool. So let's get into growth and purpose. So would love to hear about anything actionable you did to connect Laticians and the sales team to purpose.
I think so much of it was more about purposes, do they feel connected to the mission, which is our mission was make work meaningful. And so we wanted to make sure they felt that their work was meaningful. And so much of it was like creating an environment and culture where they felt the thing we were selling in market resonated with them on a personal level. Because if we were able to do that as a leadership team, then all the other pieces become easier. Because if you are the sample where you experience this, so a lot of it was around that. And then our growth playbook was very much about, let's talk about from 10 years from now, where do you want to be? We train folks to like start with that. Like, what's your North Star? And I want to learn not just from a, job and career standpoint, like where do you want to be in 10 years? To really understand sort of the full picture. Then talk about, okay, 2 years from now, what are the types of skills you need to get to that next role that you're really excited to get on? And then for this quarter, out of the 19 attributes for your role, which we would do for every role, we get very detailed on like what are the specific attributes against for an AE role or for a manager role. And then we'd say, why don't we work on 2 of these and pick specific sort of exercises? Because so much of it was around people feeling like they've got someone who cares about them. They've got someone who wants to invest in their growth. And then being very transparent around the opportunities in the business. So there's like they've got good sense for sort of what it means for me in my growth journey here. But more than sort of promotions, I think people are just looking for having developmental conversations that connect to their own. They feel like they're growing in their role. I think so much of it was around that.
Yeah. And it's so hard to feel the growth. If you're working on 10 different things at a time and the coaching is like skimming across, a wide variety of things across like over an entire quarter, it's hard to really get a validation and like a visceral feeling like I've improved that thing.
Yes.
And this is the same reason, like I always hammer my managers. We teach one thing at a time. We only teach one skill, and we're not teaching discovery, because
Yep.
discovery is a bunch of things. You're teaching just reflective questions, or I'm teaching just how to do pre-call research to understand the types of discovery, like just one tiny aspect of that thing. And so if you rep at that for 2 weeks in a row, like you can viscerally feel that I've gotten better at that thing because it becomes natural. I think that's such a big piece, like of the 19, what are the 2, and like how do you go deep on it? That makes a ton of
100%.
sense. So it's about their long-term North Star, 10 years, 2 years, and the skills they need to prepare, and then bringing that back to the quarter. Um, how else did you give people a sense of growth? Like, was it about the like scoring and performance review process, or where else would they get like this sense of progression?
Yeah, I think most of it came from that, which was how do we make sure that people feel like they're growing in their skills on a quarterly basis? And then also having career tracks where, um,
Right.
a lot of times like having defined career tracks across different roles and go to market. And a lot of times people view of like, oh, I'm a senior AE, I should become a manager. Where we created a lot of parallel tracks where it's like that doesn't have to be a promotion. Like being an AE, top performing AE, and a manager are completely different skill sets.
Yeah.
And so being
And
one
equally
doesn't
important.
exactly equally important in the business. And so I think your career tracks have to represent what you believe is the truth in the world and in the business. And so a lot of it was around career tracks as well. And we, typically had about 35% of our promotions go to internal folks. And higher, for first line managers, it was much higher. For directors, it was like sort of a sliding scale.
Yeah.
But we had like benchmarks that we ideally wanted to develop our existing team to take on bigger roles in the company. So they feel like actual purpose and growth connected to like the development that they're getting as well.
Yeah. Not to go off topic, but this is one that I find comes up a ton. So if you have a senior seller, like one that is great and they are in the top segment, your mid-market, so you don't have like true enterprise, for example, and they're like, I want to go into management, but it's not for them. How do you make it feel special enough and impactful enough to like make them want to continue to do this rep thing when maybe management's not a good fit skills or traits wise?
Yeah, I mean it's such a classic example. It's a good one. One of the things we did was, of course, you talk to them, coach them into like the why they're trying to do that. Is it just because they're competitive and want the next thing? Or is it because they're actually drawn towards the job of a manager? And we'd help them by, because even, you can have the conversation, but ultimately if somebody's set on, I want the next thing, that's what
Yeah.
they want. So what we started doing was we had a team lead program, which was the goal was we'd give folks exposure into what management meant. And so we'd pull them into cross-functional meetings. We would give them projects to own, small projects. So, you're still carrying a quota. That's your P1. But now we're giving you exposure into what is the life of a manager for a quarter. And we actually had some folks that went through that program, and we had like sort of defined what things you would do as part of that 3 months. some folks that would do that and be like, I want it. I still want it. I'm excited
Yeah.
about it. And we'd be like, okay, we're going to give you a shot. Let's do this management thing. For others, actually, it was 50-50, where 50% of the folks that said they wanted it after going through this would say, actually, you know what? I like my job
Yeah.
and I want to continue being an AE. And I think that there's a lot for me to continue learning in that space. And so we created a safe space where people come in, sort of test it without any commitments, and then decide if it's still for them. And based on that, that was part of the career track as well.
Yeah. Wait a second. There's a lot of CRM hygiene in this manager job. I hate CRM hygiene. Be like, yeah, I've tried to tell you this. Classic. I think that's an awesome way to do it. I do something similar myself. I put it's a little more informal, but I give people my reading lists and I buddy them up with somebody to mentor and coach.
Yep.
And you can see some people, like, they never miss that coaching meeting. They're devouring the books and slacking me their sort of enthusiastic updates, and other people, oh, sorry, I had a demo. I had to move the coaching meeting. It didn't happen. You're like, okay, that's fine. I think it's great for people to learn what's for them, because so much of the time we want to manage people because we want to be the boss and we want to get promoted. But it's really, oftentimes being a manager does not feel like a promotion. I had one boss and now I've got 7 bosses.
Yep.
And like, a lot of these 7 bosses don't listen to me. Like, this is not super fun.
Yep. It's like, I think people don't realize that every jump you take in management, like, you've got less and less control and more accountability. Like, that is a hard thing to, like, okay, you really want that? And you have to be excited about really sort of going into that path to take that on, because it's not fun. It's fun to be a rep and be sort of in control of your own destiny and earn your autonomy, which is, I had some of my best times as a rep. So yeah, it's so true to give people that flavor and then help them decide for themselves.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Okay, let's move into quick fire so that we can get done on time. And 4 questions, just like a sub 60-second, like your first reaction. What do you wish you knew as a new leader that you came to understand much, much later?
There's multiple paths to the same destination.
Okay, say more.
Giving people, I think sometimes I was one of the top performers on a sales team that moved into management, and I had a very specific way of doing things. So when I first moved into management, I wanted people to do things my way. And it was frustrating to see people not follow that, which is like, I know how to get to the quota. And so I think I learned that over time, that the best managers help people find their own path to the goal. And so I think there's multiple paths to the same goal, and your job as a leader is to help people uncover that for themselves.
Yeah, and lean into their unique superpowers.
Yep.
Very cool. What's the most common advice you give to mentees? So other revenue leaders, CROs, or aspiring CROs, what's the most common advice you find yourself giving to them?
People always ask me, like, what did you do when you were a manager to get ready to become a CRO? And I was like, I didn't know I wanted to be a CRO. I didn't even know if I wanted to stay in sales. And so my advice is more focus on the next 18 months, focus on your energy. What do you enjoy doing? What do you not enjoy doing? How can you do more of the thing that you're good at and enjoy doing, and sort of carve your path using that, instead of like trying to have a master plan 10 years from now. Because if you master the thing today and continue to sort of just chip away at what is the thing that really at its core aligns to who I am and my superpowers and what I enjoy doing, good things happen.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. What was the hardest lesson you had to learn as a leader?
Sometimes, no matter how much you want it for someone, they've got to want it for themselves. I'm someone that cares deeply about people. I see potential. I want to see them live up to their potential. I manage folks to their potential. And, sometimes people, whether it's life stage, whether it's, what they're excited about at that point, doesn't align with them wanting to put in all the effort. And it's frustrating. And so I think I've learned that you can't force someone to want it.
Yeah. Heartbreaking sometimes.
Yeah, it's very heartbreaking.
And so you hire against that pretty heavily, I would imagine. Just like, do they have the fire?
Yeah, hire against it and performance manage against it too. Because at some point, it's like, if you don't want it, you may not be in the right spot.
Yeah, for sure. Last question. What's the best thing you've read in the last 12 months?
Oh, haven't read a lot of business books, but my
No,
latest
the
one is
best
just
thing of anything you've
anything.
read. Yeah.
Okay. Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. Um,
Ah,
it was like an easy read that I picked up on a road trip, and I loved it. It's like talks about how in life you take these detours and put yourself in hard situations and take anti patterns when things are going well, and how do you like create friction to learn from it and grow from it, and like embracing red lights to ultimately get a lot of green lights. I thought it was beautifully, very entertaining to read. Also, really some good hidden lessons in it.
very cool. I love it. Well, this was awesome. I have pages of notes here. And I think this will be really helpful for people thinking about multi-product, like the team structure piece and the importance of layering in SEs early, this specialist versus generalist rep and the decision-making framework. That's really great. I love the incentives piece and finding ways to drive activity with the new product without massively manipulating your comp plan. I think is one that I really I'm taking away. And then this whole piece around enablement and narrative creation and how you layer it over. There's a ton of awesome stuff here. So thanks for coming. This was a blast. I had a great time, and this was really valuable.
Thank you, Kyle. This was fun. Thank you for having me.
And where can people find you if they want more from you?
Find me on LinkedIn, find me on Twitter. I'm active on both. So yeah.
Okay, nice. All right. Well, thank you again, and hope everybody else enjoyed as much as I did.
Thank you for listening to the Revenue Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, and you can find a link in the show notes. And be sure to leave a 5-star review, share it with your network, and please join me next Wednesday for another great conversation.